Welcome back to the Oz Connection. I'm your host, Colin and the chair of OzCon International. We're here today to discuss Wicked Movie with a bunch of Oz fans from around the world, from all the way from Australia, England, and America. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Aron. Aron is the producer of The Chronicles of Oz. Hi, Aron.
Hi, how you going?
Next up, and you've met him before, Mr. Chase.
Hi, Colin. Hi, everyone. A pleasure to be here.
New to the Oz Connection, but certainly not new to the world of Oz. We have Judy Bieber. Judy is a lifelong fan of Oz, lifelong member of the Oz Club, and also a lifelong OzCon International convention goer. Hey, Judy.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for having me.
And finally, but not least, I want to introduce you to Dwayne Burgess. Dwayne Burgess runs the Instagram channel The Collector of Oz, and he's also the new creative chair of OzCon International.
Hey, Colin. Good to see you all.
Thanks all. I think this has been a moment that we have all been waiting for around about 20 odd years to finally give our reaction to Wicked Movie. So, have we all seen it?
Oh, yes.
Yes, indeed.
Multiple
Three times.
So
I've only seen it the once, so I feel underqualified.
I've only seen it once also, so you're a new
good.
I've seen it 3 times so far, and I am going next week to my local AMC to watch it dubbed in Spanish.
Ooh.
I've seen it 3 times now. Yeah, one was a FYC screening, and was lucky enough to have the cast there afterwards. That was about, I think, a week and a half before it opened, and then I've seen it twice in theaters since then.
I mean, we're all extremely envious that you got to be there at the premiere and meet it with the cast pretty much, or the premiere weekend.
Yeah, well, the premiere was the day before the screening that I went to. So the premiere, I was, like, full disclosure, I was not really invited to the premiere. I was just kind of hanging about, seeing what I could see, kind of, looky-loo, peeking at the red carpet and all of that fun stuff. But the day after that was an industry screening that I went to, and the cast was all there for that, doing a talk back afterwards. So that was pretty special. Yeah,
Very, very jealous. So I've seen it 3 times over in Stoke-on-Trent, at IMAX in London this Saturday with the lovely Judy. So I've seen a couple of versions of it now, and IMAX was phenomenal.
I saw it in Melbourne, where I am, in Village Cinemas, opening night in Australia. We did the gold class, which is where they serve you lots of food and champagne as you go through it. So I sort of remember the end. It was fine. Yeah. I'm planning to see it very shortly. My niece and my nephew are interested in seeing it. So hopefully I'll get new Oz fans on board. Yay. That's my next time to see it.
Well, I was going to see it the Sunday before, but I just have a thing about sitting right in front of a movie screen. Like, I can't be in the front row. And so I ended up seeing it the Wednesday before it came out. I loved it. And then I went to go see it again on Friday. And then I went to go see it again on Sunday. I'm just going to keep watching it until I get tired of it. And I haven't yet. So fingers crossed.
Given we're all Oz fans, I suspect this is going to be a lifelong movie for all of us. I think that's a good thing to just jump in before we really deep dive on the movie. But tell me a little bit about, and Chase, you can start, what kind of Oz fan you are, how did you get into Oz, and have you seen the musical?
Yeah, so I thankfully got to see the musical on Broadway this year, which was absolutely amazing. I cried a lot. It was just so beautiful. And my Oz journey just started back in 2004, actually, whenever we did a production of The Wizard of Oz in high school. And ever since then, I had a friend who introduced me to the book Wicked. I fell in love, and I've been waiting 20 years patiently for this movie, and I'm so glad it finally happened.
I started reading the Oz books when I was about 10 years old. My 5th grade teacher introduced me to them, and then I joined the Oz Club when I was 12. So I've been a book person for a very long time, also a collector. And then I'd seen Wicked, the musical, 3 times. The first was in 2003, right after it opened in New York. my sister, I was visiting, and she said, "Oh, there's this new Oz musical. Let's go." And so it was the original cast. It was, including Joel Grey, Idina, everybody. And then I saw it once in London, and then I saw it again on Broadway with my kids and my husband and my sister and my dad. So that was really special. We had a 3-generational thing. And yeah, I love all the things Oz. I'm a book person, but I also incredibly admire Gregory Maguire's creation as a kind of alternative Oz. And also, like Chase, I was waiting patiently. Like, when are they going to do a movie? So at last it's here. And I'm also inspired now, since Chase said he's going to check it out with Spanish dubbing. I'm in Portugal right now, so I think I need to see it with a Portuguese audience and see what that feels like.
The first time I saw Wicked was 2005, so it wasn't the original cast on Broadway, but it was, I think, the first or maybe the second round. So it was Megan Hilty and Eden Espinosa, and they were phenomenal. Seeing that in 2005 kind of changed my whole. Well, I mean, it sounds overblown to say like changed my life, but when I saw it, I decided that I wanted to study set design just because the spectacle, it was such a big scale. And it was, I think, the combination of that and it being Oz, which from before I can even remember was always my, that was my fandom. So seeing those two things together, that was when I decided to change my college, change my major. It was like set design from there. And then so that kind of changed everything. And yeah, I've been waiting 20 years for this film. And I think I've seen it four times. The production, the theatrical production, 3 times on Broadway and once or twice on tour here in LA. So it sounds like a lot when you say it, but over 20 years, it's like every few years you're like, I got to get my Wicked fix again. But it's nice to finally have the movie. We'll be able to play it whenever we want that Wicked fix now.
I got into Wicked long before there was a musical. I was a big fan of the book. I sort of got into Oz back when I was a kid with the anime Sinar series, and then that led to the movie, which led to the books, and then sort of the general world of Oz after that. And round about, would have been probably early 2000, I was looking online at various Oz stuff, just trying to get myself, because I hadn't been around Oz for a while. I thought, oh, remember those books I used to read? And discovered, there's a book all about the Wicked Witch of the West and the background behind her, and there's pointing her as the good guy. I thought, okay, that's interesting. Found it in the library, read it, loved it. Then a few years later, probably around 2005, I think I discovered a backing track of Defying Gravity on one of those particular websites where you download music. And it intrigued me. I thought, oh, I like this music. How does that work? Then found the original and thought, oh, that's how that song goes. Okay, this is interesting. Discovered a bootleg of Wicked, because it wasn't here in Australia at the time, and it was like, oh, but they've taken all the good stuff out. They've made it. They've streamlined it. Oh no! So I had opinions, but since then I've been obsessed with the musical. Watched on stage several times. I saw it on the West End about 15 years ago. Saw it in Melbourne when each time it's turned up. Saw a dozen amateur productions, which has been different, seeing the different ways they interpret it, which is great. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, too often, and read the books more often than is probably healthy for anybody, because they're so good.
So I'm over in England, and I've been a lifelong Oz fan since I was 3 years old. Wizard of Oz, MGM was my Frozen. I watched it multiple times a day. I love the books. I love most of the media out there, movies, cinema, and driven me to the point of running a Wizard of Oz convention and eventually this YouTube channel. Just, it's in my blood. But it's also the friendship connections for things like OzCon, where we've all come together. Every single person on this Zoom has been and attended OzCon or has been involved in creating content for OzCon or being on a panel or a presentation. So I absolutely love that. For me, there was trepidation going in. That, this is 20 odd years. I'd seen it on the West End. I saw Kerry Ellis, who is just the most fantastic singer playing Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West. So I was deeply concerned that this movie was split into two halves. And I was also concerned about Ariana Grande. I didn't mind, but I didn't really see her as a big movie performer or singer in a theatrical sense, and I didn't really know much about Cynthia. But the split into two parts really concerned me.
Yeah, so for me, when you say emotional reaction, it was very emotional. I was kind of the same way. It was like I didn't want to get too excited about it because it had been 2 decades of build-up to get this film. And then so by the time I saw it, I was like, I was like, I always go into something kind of ready to be disappointed, and then if it's any better than that, it's just a bonus. And so, just from the first scene, No One Mourns the Wicked, as soon as I saw that and heard Ariana, I just started crying in that scene because I knew that we were in good hands with John Chu, and I knew that Ariana was going to sound phenomenal. I knew what she sounded like as a pop star, and I wasn't sure how that was going to translate to this. And as soon as I saw that first scene, I could just sit back and relax. I knew that the rest of the film, if it was anything like that opening scene, we were in good hands and it was going to be amazing. So I was a mess that first viewing. I'm not really a crier, as Colin can confirm, and I was like full neck tears running down. Probably 7 or 8 times. It was just full crying. And it's just, I think it's so emotional because it's so ingrained in me. Like I said, it's been my fandom since before I can remember, all the different aspects of Oz pretty much, and to see it treated with such reverence and so much just resources being put behind this, and seeing Oz on such a scale, that was really, really emotional for me.
It had been such a long time coming to finally seeing the movie. I didn't know what to expect, and I was just absolutely blown away. I was extremely impressed with Ariana just because of how I've seen her act in the past before, and it was amazing just watching it, and then like in the middle of the movie, it's like, wow, I forgot it was Ariana Grande. And so I was really impressed with not only her acting, but as well as Cynthia Erivo and Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum.
I think like Dwayne, like as soon as it opened, within about 30 seconds, I like, this is going to be fine. And that opening scene, it kind of felt like I imagined in 1939, if you went to the movie theater and saw the MGM film and had that sense of wonder, like you had stepped into this new world with the technology and the special effects they had at the time, that this to me had that same kind of wow factor where you are just immediately drawn in. It had that huge, it's a big, beautiful ensemble piece. The propaganda is pitch perfect. And yeah, Ariana comes down in her bubble. And we'll talk more about this later. I think Ariana brings so much to that character. Everyone's talking about Cynthia and like, I want to talk about Ariana. I think we all are going to, but I found she brought layers to that role that are not in the book, and to my mind have not been in the versions of the musical that I have seen, and did something really special. And again, yes, the casting is great, the sets are great, and we were in that IMAX theater right in the front where we were surrounded by Oz, and it was just really something else. And Colin said, there's a scene you're going to cry, and we'll talk about that later. And yes, I cried. He cried. We cried together. So, yeah.
Like everyone else, I was a bit nervous about it. I remember the big buzz around Oz the Great and Powerful 10 years ago, and that was it was okay, it was fine, bit of disappointment, sort of like, they could have done so much better. And so this the build up to this felt the same way. I thought, oh no, it's going to be another Hollywood attempt at Oz, and it's going to be James Franco doing weird stuff. And I think it was around the trailers when they came out, and then one of them came out with the Wicked Witch theme from the MGM film, da-dum, in the background. I thought, oh, okay, this has got my attention. And I think, like everyone else, I was a bit blown away. I'd read the reviews before I'd seen it. The advanced reviews, and everyone was raving about it more than I've seen for any movie in a long time. So that got me a bit, okay, I'm hopeful. This is good. And yeah, sat in there, front row of the Village Cinemas with the big screen in front of me. It was really good. I was nervous about Ariana. I saw her. They did a 25th anniversary Wicked thing a couple of years ago, where she sang Wizard and I remember thinking, oh, she's okay, but I don't like the way she's performing this. She's a bit off, but she completely surpassed my expectations. I thought, oh wow, she stole the show. I think she did almost better than Cynthia. I think it was really, really good. I didn't cry, to be honest. It was sort of not that sort of movie for me. But yeah, the last, third that I was enthralled. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was like, wow, this is so. And we'll talk about that later when we talk more spoilers. But yeah, love it. I can't wait to see it again, to be honest. I nearly saw it again last night.
We're going to have to make you cry next time around, Aaron, because it's just not acceptable. I'm ready to remove you from this call. I mean, I was worried about crying a lot because Dwayne had already pre-warned me that he was crying and he's another crier. So I am that kind of emotional person. If I'm watching something, I will get a bit teary if I think something looks really great or there's a bit of emotional resonance. And there was a little bit of that. But I just absolutely poured my heart out every time we're in the Oz Dust ballroom sequence, which we'll talk about when we're a bit in more spoiler territory, like to the point of trying to stop myself from making audible sobs, both on the first viewing and the third viewing, sat next to Judy, like trying to hold it in. It was that emotional, and it just looks stunning. This is an Oz that feels real in my mind after seeing so many versions. The MGM version is burned in, but it's so old now, it's a set, and there's elements of it where it's flat backgrounds and that kind of thing. This feels like they've taken that and then made it into a fully realized world in a way that we've never seen fully on screen before. And it's epic in all of its scope. It feels like a once-in-a-lifetime movie. And I don't think that's in any way an over-the-top response to what I've seen and to people's reaction. I've been to 2 viewings now where people have actually got up and applauded in Britain, which we do not do. So let's talk about the casting. Let's lean into Ariana, because we already started on that. And I thought that she has embodied Glinda in a way I never thought possible. It was like she literally was born to play that character. I don't know how she's done it, but I'm utterly convinced. And although there's a little bit of narcissism in there with that character, and it's about her, there are nuances the way she plays that you feel her emotions throughout this movie, whether it be from the beginning or as it goes along. And even though at times she can be a character that you kind of want to loathe, she just brings something to it. There's always that little bit behind the eyes that maybe she's not comfortable with being who she is and she wants to be something better. And I've not seen that with some Oscar-winning actors before. Just absolutely outstanding.
Glinda in Wicked is a weirdly difficult role, which you wouldn't think it is, but it actually is. I've seen several of them where they have 2 modes. They have perpy and happy and legally blonde, and they have crying, and that they bounce between the 2, and that's it. But there's so much more nuance to make her likable, and that's why I liked what Ariana brought to it. She there were moments, and I thought the script helped her as well, where she wasn't automatically just vapid and mean girl. She was you could see her perspective a little bit and what she was trying to do. There's a bit very early on when she's trying to help Elphaba explain, and she publicly display how everyone's in front of everyone, how she can help Elphaba be the best she can be, and try and say, look how good I am. And you can see what she's doing, but it looks like it's coming from a almost genuine place of trying to help someone. That really warmed to the character and the choices she made from there on. It's like, okay, she's fighting with Elphaba, and we don't like her for that because we're all Team Elphaba. We have to be. That's the point of the movie. But you sort of get her point of view. You get her opinion. I love that. I loved how she brought that.
I think Ariana brings a real. There's so many qualities, but I think she brings a real vulnerability to the role. And I agree, she's not just a mean girl. And even in the first scene when she's coming down in her bubble and said, "Were you friends?" And she doesn't look uncomfortable because she's being caught out in a political moment. What other depictions I've seen of the Galinda character, she's intensely strategic. She's very calculating. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's vain. And she's an operator, right? And in this, you can tell from that very first moment, she's feeling anguish. At least that's what I saw. And then as it goes, in some ways, I think she feels very fragile to me. Like she's a mean girl, probably because maybe she's a little insecure, maybe because she doesn't want people to turn on her. It didn't feel like she was mean. It felt like she was adopting that persona so people wouldn't turn on her or something. And there was this just, she also felt so young. I mean, she felt like a young girl, who's going away to school, who's trying to figure things out, who wants to be on the top of the pecking order. And she's in her young 30s. Cynthia's a little older, but she felt like a 16-year-old or something. I mean, she had that very sort of naive kind of, yeah, I'm going to mess up and make mistakes, but very kind of naive, confused, and trying to kind of bluster her way through it. I mean, that's what I saw. And that at heart, there is I didn't hate her, but far from it. I find in other depictions, I found Glinda or Galinda kind of obnoxious. I didn't find her obnoxious. I found her I kind of wanted to root for her to be the best person the best version that she could be.
Like it's kind of a perfect mix of Ariana being fantastic, the new medium of this being film instead of stage, so we get those closer, more intimate moments. The length, being able to have more time to kind of realize who these characters are, whereas you don't really realize how kind of quick paced the stage version is until you've seen the film, and it feels like, oh, this is the amount of time that we needed. So I feel like the next time I see the stage version, I'm going to feel like it's really quick. So I think it's kind of the combination of all those things. Obviously, if Ariana wasn't up to the task, then it wouldn't have been as fantastic as it is. But kind of all those things coming together, and she's able to step up into that role in a way that we've never seen. And it's like this perfect combination. So yeah, I thought she was great.
Kristen Chenoweth originated the role of Glinda on Broadway, and was able to pick up that mantle, which Kristen Chenoweth herself was picking up a mantle that Billy Burke had laid out from the original 1939 movie. And so it's so refreshing and fun to see these little echoes of not only just like the Broadway production skiing about in the movie, but also the reflections of the 1939 Wizard of Oz film as well. And I will say this, Ariana is not Kristen Chenoweth and Kristen Chenoweth is not Billy Burke, but I just love how all of these people have added to Glinda and not taken away from it. And that's one thing that I want to say that I agree with Judy is the youthfulness of this character and how the nuances of dealing with pressures from school and those around you. And so I'm very grateful that Rihanna was able to flesh out even more of this seemingly simple character that is slightly more complex.
What do we think about Cynthia? What did you think about the performance? I'll go to you, Dwayne, first.
Well, I was familiar with Cynthia Erivo from some of the Broadway stuff that she had done. I'd never seen her live, but listened to a lot of the cast recordings, so I was aware of her, vocal prowess, and have seen. I think she did a like live from Lincoln Center or some concert like that on PBS, and so I've seen her, and I've seen her in other film roles and stuff. So I wasn't nervous about her in kind of the same way that I was with Ariana. I was interested to see how her voice was going to translate to some of these songs that we know so well at this point over the past 20 years. Um, but no, I was not nervous about how she was going to do it. It was just more of anticipation, how she was going to take that role and make it hers. And yeah, I mean, I think she's knocked it out of the park. I think that we're hearing a lot more about Ariana because maybe people were a bit more surprised, whereas Cynthia, at least from my perspective, I knew she was going to be fantastic, and she was. So it's like, what do you say about that? It's like, yeah, of course, she was great. I mean, obviously, this has kind of launched her into the limelight, like nothing before that she's done. So that's kind of fun to see her come into her own. But yeah, I was not surprised, but I think she was fantastic. I've been listening to the soundtrack over and over. Um,
One thing for me that I really love about Cynthia Erivo is that apart from like the her range when it comes to her Broadway prowess, is also the fact that this character has always been like an outside character. And one thing I read was that there hasn't ever been a full time uh, African American or Black woman to play Elphaba on Broadway, and so for her to tackle this role, it's quite meta, really, when you think about it, because the character originally played by Margaret Hamilton, who she was a white woman painted green, and then you all have this woman who is who has dark skin, who has had different experiences than other people, and so for her to bring that to this story and character is really important. But I will say I loved the cast recording of The Color Purple that Cynthia Erivo did. It was beautiful, and it. I didn't really know about her that much before Wicked, but now because of Wicked, I've been able to be exposed to more of her music, and she's really quite stellar. Very well-rounded and very talented.
I was not familiar with her prior to seeing this. Yes, I live under a rock. I live well. I don't live near major theater. Let's just put it that way. And I, of course, stunning. The acting, the voice. Oh my God, the voice. But I also thought she managed to, at times, convey that sort of girlish uncertainty, not to the extent that Ariana does. I mean, if I looked them together, I mean, Ariana felt like a girl, and Cynthia felt like a young woman, right? Who had also, of course, the character has been honed by different experiences. She's experienced trauma. She's been ostracized. So she has a very different kind of personality. But there are occasional moments where they zoom in on her face a lot, especially her eyes and her mouth. And there's in her little gap in her teeth, and there's she also, and I mean, she's not a teenager, right? But she was able to, I think, convey that kind of youth and uncertainty also with a lot of power, and the kind of juxtaposition of those two qualities I thought was just stunning. And then, of course, as the movie unfolds, you see more and more of the power and the sureness. You see her growing into herself. And Ariana that hasn't happened yet. I think we'll see that in part 2. But yeah, I thought she was fantastic. And I read somewhere, I had no idea, they're both small women. They're both like 5'1". She did not feel like 5'1". Maybe they stuck her in those boots to kind of give her a boost or something. But she is like a big presence, and she did not feel small in any way. Dwayne is nodding there, so.
Yeah, I'm also just thinking about all the stunt work I've seen her do on the wires and cables. I don't know if you've seen some of that behind the scenes footage, but it is, I mean, wow. The fact that they were singing live too, but just to see her singing live, getting flung hundreds of feet back and forth on these sound stages, and sticking a landing and hitting the note and knowing that she was in a tight harness and in a corset, and it's just like the Olympics of musical theater film.
I didn't know about her beforehand. I thought, I don't know who this person is. This random person playing Elphaba, great. And she blew me away. She was really, she brought that depth to the character that the character needs. She balanced really well with Ariana, which was, again, if you don't have Glinda and Elphaba balanced properly against each other, it doesn't work. And yeah, she was really, she brought that pain of being the outsider, the person that's sort of thing. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about the Ozdust Ballroom, but that sequence was especially comparing it to the musical where it's very rushed. It brought you that, you felt that gut-wrenching awkwardness about the whole sequence. And yeah, it was really good seeing her being empowered at the end. That was the last third that really got me going. It was like, seeing her finally literally defy gravity and sort of do all that. The singing, fantastic.
Cynthia, I'd never heard of her before. Before doing this, totally new to her type of music when I've seen this. There is a rawness and a vulnerability that she brings to Elphaba that is not on the stage because there is not the time. Elphaba on the stage is quite, confident, has already faced down the bullies and is just straight out there a lot of the time. You don't really get much of a chance to see that, maybe a little bit in the second act of the stage play, but you really see that side of her. And she plays it so well. She had me crying like multiple times throughout this movie because she brought something to Elphaba that really resonated with me, which is to be seen, to be truly seen, and how she reacts to that, whether it be Morrible or Glinda or the Wizard or whatever, which makes it even more powerful when she is betrayed by some of these characters. And that, for me, has just made that character so much more rich. And I think because she's a black queer woman, just brings even more layers to it when she's playing this character that we just would never have got with the likes of Adina or Kerry Ellis and the multiple other people who played this role. Not that there's anything wrong with what they've done. So let's have a little bit of chat then about characters that have stood out for you from the ensemble, whether it be Fiyero, or it's Madame Morrible, or it's Nessa Rose, or it's the Wizard.
I mean, again, everyone did a phenomenal job. I thought that the casting was pitch perfect. I love Jeff Goldblum as the Wizard, but Michelle Yeoh also does that pivot, and we talked about this after the movie, where she seems maternal and caring and nurturing, and then boom, all of a sudden she becomes the power broker and the evil one. And it's like flipping a switch, and like, yes, she's so convincing. I'm curious to see what they do with Nessa Rose in part 2, because I think there's talent there. She certainly has a lovely voice. And in the book, Nessa Rose is actually quite a force to be reckoned with, and I would like to see what they do with her.
I agree with Madame Morrible. In the musical, she's very theatrical, broad. She's very one note. I want to put it that way. So she's sort of very big and loud, and that's it. You can see that when she turns evil in the end of the first half, it's like, she's always been there. Whereas this one, Michelle Yeoh made it brought a whole lot more subtlety to it, which I loved. It was a lot quieter, a lot more reserved, a lot more realistic. And anyone who follows the Chronicles of Oz knows I like my realism in Oz. And you sort of, it made sense when suddenly she turns up in the Emerald City at the end and think, yep, that's what she is. But it was a more natural progression. It wasn't quite so much the pantomime dame that we've sort of already seen. I also want to single out Jeff Goldblum. I loved the way that he, he's Jeff Goldblum. He did his usual shtick, but I loved him as his usual shtick was perfect for the Wizard. The Wizard was just, this weird guy that doesn't quite know where the end of his sentence is going and all that sort of thing, and sort of really playing it up on the moment. He reminded me a bit of I was watching The Witches of Oz the other day with Christopher Lloyd as the Wizard, and it was the same sort of thing. Christopher Lloyd comes and does his usual thing for the Wizard, and it works. And the same thing happens with Jeff Goldblum. He turns up, he's Jeff Goldblum, and it's perfect. He really is a guy that sort of feels right at the edge of his depth. He's not out of his depth, but he sort of feel like any minute now he's going to fall off and everything's going to fall apart, and that's perfect for especially where it's going to go next in this part 2. I think we have to talk about Fiyero before we go on to anyone else, how amazing he was.
Fiyero's number, Dancing Through Life, is probably my hands down one of my favourite sequences in this movie. I actually cried just watching that, and it's not because it's just so well done, but also Fiyero. I mean, he's hot, isn't he? Let's face it. Let's get it out there. Like, it's perfect casting for Fiyero and the way that he plays it.
And thank you. The boys and the girls all think that Fiyero is hot, and that was evident, and I love that.
And probably secretly a couple of the straight guys as well.
No, I mean, I'm glad that you're saying what I was thinking. So I was about to say, are we not going to talk about Jonathan Bailey? So we've touched upon that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen him in other things, but he's a bit of a chameleon. I feel like we've said this about other characters, but brought a depth to Fiyero that I've never really cared about that character, and he's kind of one of my favorite characters out of this movie now. Just more charming. I think in the musical, I've always seen him as more self-absorbed, and seeing Jonathan Bailey portray him in this now, it's totally different for me. I actually care about that character, whereas before I could have take him or leave him.
One of my kids told me that Jonathan Bailey, the horse that he rides, is the same one that he rode in Bridgerton, and he requested that horse. So
I heard that. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing with same with Michelle Yeoh. There's a subtlety he brings to the role where, again, on the stage it's a lot more broad. He's a lot more very shallow, very level of Glinda, really, because he's designed to match that. And right from the moment you see him, he calls Elphaba out on her bravado and her defensiveness and all that sort of thing. And the first time you see him, and it's a whole different dynamic, which I love. And it comes up right thing where in the musical, when you hear Fiyero say, I'm very self-absorbed and deeply shallow, you sort of believe it. You think, yeah, fair enough. There's nothing in his head. That's what he is. But in this one, you feel like, no, he's definitely not that. He's putting it on an act because that's what he does, and that's how he does it. And he did it so well. It was so fun to watch. The Dancing Through Life. I've always loved that song. I've auditioned with that song before, and watching him do that with the spinning library and everything was so brilliant. I loved how that, and I want that library, by the way. That's my new next house goal. Has to have a spinning library.
Well, one of the characters that I really enjoyed on the stage that I was surprised with their portrayal on the screen was Dr. Dillamond. On Broadway, he's portrayed more humanoid, like he's on his hind legs and he's able to walk around and stuff. But what I loved about Peter Dinklage as Dr. Dillamond was how they were able to make the world that he lived in accessible for him, which I also just in general really liked that they made the world of Oz accessible to everyone, regardless if they're an animal or if they happen to be in a wheelchair, like Nessarose. And so that was really quite amazing. And also, because the movie has been split into two parts, I'm really curious from what I know about Dr. Dillamond happening in Act Two, if it's going to be that much more heart wrenching whenever we maybe see him again or not.
I think the way that they portrayed not just Dillerman but the animals in this compared to the stage version is you do get more insight into what is really happening to them as a culture, which is very politically on point right now with how certain cultures get demonized by a political power no matter where it is in the world. And this is happening in Oz, and we find out that the wizard is responsible for that, and the motivation you get more motivation for what Elphaba is doing in this version due to this betrayal of Dillamond and the other characters. I would have actually, the only small criticism I have of the movie is I would have actually liked to have seen a bit more of that.
Agree with Judy about what we're talking about with Nessa Rose. The books have so much that she does in the second half, really, and the whole thing. In the musical, I've never quite got the idea of her being the Wicked Witch of the East. It's sort of, she's there, she's the Wicked Witch of the East because she has to be, basically, because of the Wicked Witch of the West. I really hope in the second half they make use of that and they make her as wicked as she needs to be. That I'm looking forward to, hopefully.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting in this version. They come to Shiz, and it's clear that Nessa Rose is there to be a student, and Elphaba is not, which is not the same in the book. Nessa Rose comes later, and she's quite steely. She does not want her sister butting in. She wants to do things on her own. I mean, she has a spine. And in the musical, she always came across to me as being sort of slightly pathetic and kind of, grateful for any attention she gets. But you can tell from the beginning, at least how they set her up in part one, that she definitely has backbone.
They are playing her differently. I think that she's very aloof on anything that happens to Elphaba and quite cold to it, which I think may be quite interesting what they bring to Nessa Rose as the Witch of the East in the next movie, if they particularly bring out a few more elements from the books, which they have in a little bit of places here and there.
In general, I think we've been talking about the different actors and actresses and the different roles and kind of attributing a lot of this stuff to how they portray them, which that's a big part of it. But I think also it's, you have to give a lot of props to the way that the screenplay has been written for the film, how John Chu has taken that and elaborated on a lot of these characters and allowed us to see some more of that depth. Obviously, the actor plays a huge role in that, but just, let us not forget that there's a lot of things that allowed them to give us those portrayals to really flesh those out more.
Yeah, John Chu's vision ultimately is what we've got on screen, and he's been very, very complimentary. And if you listen to interviews, he talks a lot about the MGM movie. He even talks about Return to Oz, and he also talks about the books. And the books do get kind of more than a little bit of a nod in this version of the movie.
So, traditionally, whenever a musical comes from Broadway to the silver screen, they usually take a song or two out and then they replace a song with new songs. And so we didn't get any really new songs, but we did get new lyrics inside a song, which I thought was just absolutely amazing. Also, I love whenever there's a show inside a show, because it enables the story to tell another story to be more informative, which for the stage production, it's the first time we hear of the Grimmery is whenever Madame Morble presents it, and Glinda goes, "Is that the Grimmery?" If you're familiar with the books, then yeah, you would know what the Grimmery is, but watching Wicked for the first time, you wouldn't know. And so for the wise ones in the Wizomania scene to explain what the Grimmery was, I thought that was really wonderful, especially for those who had never seen the musical or read the books.
And an element of richness there if you are familiar with the Broadway production, because, we get in this sequence, we get the two original Elphabas, the original Alphabet and Glinda, which is Kristen Chenoweth, it was Glinda, and I'm going to fumble over the name. Somebody help me.
Idina Menzel.
Adina
Thank you.
Menzel.
Having them in this, I think, just shows the respect for the Broadway musical. That yes, they could have not been in it and the movie would have flowed well, but I think a little bit of fan service by having them just in it and then continuing the song, One Short Day in the Emerald City, I think it just takes it to another level and just gives them that moment that's absolutely well deserved on scene, and brings a little bit of humor to it. But also in there is a lot of references to the wonderful Wizard of Oz within this same sequence. Judy, you were talking about some of that after the IMAX showing.
I mean, like the soldier uniforms, both for the men and women. I mean, the women ones were straight out of Denslow. The men too, sort of soldier with the green whiskers type. And then we didn't talk about this, but when they later on, when they end up in the attic and all the Wizard's old stuff is there, it's all Oscar Diggs all the time, which again is definitely sort of comes right out of the books. And I think that the Emerald City itself too is a really interesting kind of amalgam of Denslow, the MGM. It's got a lot of elements of previous, Emerald Cities. I think, Aron was talking about all these sort of layers, right, that we get in the movie that pay homage to 1939, to return to the books. And so I think all of that was really nice to see for the discerning viewer, who can find the Easter eggs as they were, right? And for, but I think if you knew nothing about Wicked, I'm really curious, like if somebody didn't know the Oz books, never seen the musical, went to the movie, like what they would make of it.
No, you're good, and I might tap my neighbour up for that because she went with her son, and they've never even seen MGM Wizard of Oz. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm friends with them, but they loved every minute of it. And I know Dwayne, you mentioned to me about in the women's uniform in the MGM sequence, and there was even other random things like the hammerheads from the Wonderful Wizard of Oz referenced in this.
In the Emerald City, there are these, I need to take a screenshot because I'm not exactly sure if they're like fire hydrants or something. And I think they had them on the NBC special as part of their set dressing as well. And each one had there were 4 of them with the different colors, red, purple, yellow, blue. And they had the label on the top of them for the different lands. So that was kind of a little fun nod. The costumes obviously are verbatim out of the book, out of the illustrations, which is just really fun to see those realized. Something I saw yesterday that, I've seen it 3 times and I didn't really pick up on it. The Universal logo at the beginning of the movie, the sound, if you're listening, it sounds like splashing water and then Elphaba's like scream during that, but it's sort of this like clouded sound off in the distance and creaking metal and stuff at the same time is kind of what I was picking up. So I wasn't really like clocking in on exactly what that was. And I saw someone post about it yesterday and they're like, if you listen carefully, that's Elphaba, melting. And I listened back to it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay. So like, there's picking up on things that even though I've seen it 3 times already, I have missed. So
there's also worthwhile referencing even the Universal logo is a new take on the 39 logo that they had at the time. So where they're just paying homage to the MGM original movie. And a couple of things I've spotted, which is Return to Oz references. So in the beginning, when they're introducing the professors at Shears, they mention Professor Mombi. And I think to look out for, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but there is someone sat behind the teachers on the right-hand side who looks very much like Nurse Wilson style Return to Oz with the hair and everything. So I don't know if that's what they were going for as a nod. A couple of people said, oh, it's a reference to Marvelous, and I don't believe it is. I believe John Chu has mentioned Return to Oz a couple of times about paying respect to it. And I think most people would be familiar with Mombi from Return to Oz, not from Marvelous Land of Oz, as a populace. And then also we get the Deadly Desert when Elphaba goes running through. And there's a couple of Oz references there if you haven't spotted it, which is there's a rainbow pops up around her. She's running down a field singing The Wizard and I. Bluebirds take off as well. And then she comes right to the end, which looks very similar to like the White Cliffs of Dover or something like that, because it was filmed in England. And then there is the Great Deadly Desert, all in all its glory, which is rare to see in Oz productions, to be fair, apart from Return to Oz.
One thing that I thought was interesting was back to Wizomania, back in the Emerald City. Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, they're both dressed in these beautiful, like, flowy fabric things. When you see Idina Menzel, that specific pink it reminded me so very much of Billy Burke's Glinda, just the fabric and the stars and just how flowy it was. And then I saw Kristen Chenoweth's, it looked more purple, but I saw some behind the scene photos and it's actually more blue. It does look purple on screen, but there is blue, and it kind of reminded me of, the pink one, Idina Menzel's was Glinda's from the 1939, and then from The Wiz, Lena Horne's Glinda at the end was wearing blue with stars and stuff. And so I've seen it 3 times so far, and every time I see it, I very specifically see Billy Burke's Glinda essence on Idina, and then I also see Lena Horne's blue Glinda there as well.
All of us have seen the Broadway musical. We've probably played the album to death, particularly on the run-up to this movie. What is everyone's feelings on the soundtrack? What they've heard? Is it changing now to being your favorite version?
It's a bit like apples and oranges to me. I think I'll always want to listen to the Broadway version as well, but this version sounds so much bigger. I think also having I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say the Broadway orchestra was around 24, I think, and then 24 piece. And then obviously for the film, it's like over 100 or something. So just the sound of it, sounds that much bigger, which is just fun. It feels like Wicked on steroids a little.
One thing that I love just from the very beginning of the movie was for No One Warns the Wicked, you hear not only little hints of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, but also the pre-Broadway cast recording. Like they had a concept of the show before it went on Broadway, and you can actually go on YouTube and find it. But apart from the Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead that you hear, you also hear anyways, I have the lyrics. It's what all the denizens of Oz are singing, and it's anyways, I'll send you a link to that. But you can hear that original pre-Broadway music, and then you hear, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and then you hear the Broadway No One Mourns the Wicked. And so from the very beginning, I was really impressed with what you could hear. And there's a lot of stuff that you hear from the MGM movie sprinkled throughout. You hear, I remember whenever the lion cub scene happened and the bike, and in the very background, you hear a very, very specific, familiar tone from the 1939 movie with the Elmira Gulch theme playing as they're speeding away. And there's other ones too, but I'd love for anyone else to chime in.
Yeah, I heard some of the sort of snippets here and there with like, that's a bit, that's a bit of Merry Old Land of Oz and things like that. I would like to see more of it, to be honest. I think probably would have been prohibitively expensive, and it's not the Wizard of Oz, it's Wicked, so they really wouldn't do it. But I would love to have seen a version of Wicked that really brought in a lot more of those themes, where you heard Over the Rainbow and heard the Wicked Witch theme more often, and sort of integrated more into like Defying Gravity. That would have set me off. But I loved how it sounded. It was, it's the Broadway musical on steroids. It's everything so much bigger, so much broader. It changed it enough that it made it fresh for me, because like I've heard it. I've been listening to Wicked for 20 odd years. It's a bit at this point. It's like I almost can't watch the Broadway musical because it's like, yep, what's happening now? Yep, we get to the next song yet, and I'm too familiar with it. So it refreshed it a bit for me, which was good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with you in terms of it like being like a reboot or refresh, because there was a time when my youngest child listened to the soundtrack over and over and over and over again, which was fine because you can never have too much, but it was a lot. And I guess one of the highest compliments I could pay to this is that I wasn't thinking about the original soundtrack at all. And I think part of it is because the length of it, the pacing is different. So it's not like in your head, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we can expect a song now. It's a very different integration of the music and the character development and the acting. And so when the songs came, I wasn't anticipating them in quite the same way. And I didn't even think, to be honest, of the original soundtrack. With all that said, I don't think like I'll be reaching for Jeff Goldblum or Michelle Yeoh's singing. They were fine. But that's, again, it's not about them. It's about Glinda and Elphaba mostly, and also the big ensemble pieces.
The soundtrack is so lovingly looked at, but I think what makes this truly brilliant and the whole production is that it's Stephen Schwartz. He's back again. So he's retooling all of this with an enormous orchestra so he can bring whatever he wants to that's true from the original. It's not somebody else coming in and doing their own take on it. And the same with the script writing. It's the same script writer and everything. So it didn't take me away from it in any way, shape, or form. I love the new sounds that would come from it, and Cynthia's take on it is very, very different to the past. And I played the CD to death.
I was just going to say to that point about Stephen Schwartz. I was listening to a podcast a week or so ago, and it was Stephen and Winnie Holzman, and they were talking about how not only have they had 20 years of time together going to various openings of productions and spending the weekend together and things like that to talk about what they would want to do when this becomes a film. But even from the very beginning, Universal bought the rights to Wicked to just do a film. And they stepped in and said, whoa, let us try to do a Broadway musical version of this. So from the very beginning, even before the Broadway show, there was always, they always knew that a film was going to happen one day with Wicked. So, thinking about that, it's like 20 years of people thinking about what do I want to change? How can we grow this?
There was a couple of interviews recently that I found very, very interesting, and I'm going to wrap this up in a minute. Winnie and Stephen have both recently alluded to that they are in talks for something past Wicked, but not Wicked Part 3 and not Wicked Part 4. I think this would be the only way you could do this, so hear me out, which is I want them to do their version of The Wizard of Oz. So after these two movies are done, that this is written with Schwartz music and Winnie writing the story, but done as the reverse of Wicked, because I think they'd be the only way you could get a Wizard of Oz musical out there that wouldn't necessarily take away from the MGM in some way, but would let people see it. I'd be very excited if that was to come to pass, but I don't know what exactly they're going to do with that, because I don't think there's enough in the other Wicked books to bring out a musical. I may be completely wrong about that. But that excites me a lot because I love MGM, but it's 85 years old. And now we finally have this wonderful Oz movie that can make people see past just MGM, that there's so much more. So on that thought, what I was going to ask each of you to do to close up was to give out of 5 stars this movie and any closing thoughts from each of you in terms of the movie, whether it be about the legacy, how you feel, just anything you haven't really got across before.
I want to say 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I can't wait to see it again. tempted to go see it tonight. It's like, oh, this is it's a really good movie. I'll be watching it over and over again. Love Wicked, always have. I want to talk about things I didn't quite like necessarily. I think it felt a little bit too long. Is my only concern. Is like there's certain bits like, okay, you could have cut about 10, 15 minutes out of it. Sort of by the time I got to the end of it, while I was gripped, I was also like, yeah, get on with it. Hurry up. I'm ready to go home. That was that. I also would like to see a lot more of the books come out of it. And that's where I think it's going to be interesting if they do Wicked 3 and 4. You were talking about trying to, you couldn't really do it like the Son of a Witch and Lion Among Men and Out of Oz. You couldn't really adapt those because this musical moves so far away from the books that they're not really compatible. They're multiverse sort of things, they're different universes. I would have liked to have seen a bit more. You saw bits of the books brought in where you saw like Dulcie Bear is Elphaba's nanny at the beginning, and Nanny is a big character in the book. And various Easter eggs, you think, oh yeah, that's from the Wicked book, oh that's great, and things like that. And it's sort of, but it's, I would have liked to have seen more plot points, more ideas, more of that come into it. But that said, still 5 out of 5. I will go and see it again. I will be seeing it many, many times. I would love to see their take on the Wizard of Oz itself. I'm hoping that comes in next movie. I think in part 2, I hope there's a bit more of the Oz story brought into it, that Dorothy's an actual character and not just off the side somewhere. I think there's a lot of mileage in there to tell, now that we've set up the Wicked universe, basically, in this, to then do the Wizard of Oz with all that backstory in it. So suddenly, when we get to the end of it and Elphaba's hit with the water, you see Dorothy and Elphaba's perspective. That would be really interesting if they can make that work.
I will give it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the reason why is because I have to wait an entire year to watch the second act. One thing I will say, just there were a few things that were cut out that I would have loved to have them keep in the musical. Just two things really just stick out. One was the whenever Bach introduces himself, Munchkinland, and Glinda responds, "Aren't you a little tall to be a Munchkinlander?" And he responds, "Oh, my family married into height." That was one of my favorite lines that was cut. And then another one was when they're in the Ozda's ballroom. "What's in the punch? Lemons and melons and pears. Oh my!" That's not why it got a 4 out of 5 stars. Like, it was a beautiful movie. Again, having to wait, but those little tiny little things, it's such a long movie. I would have loved a little bit more, but that's just me being a greedy fan. So, but still, wonderful film.
5.5 out of 5. I don't know. I really loved it. Was it perfect? No. The length didn't bother me actually until the very end. I thought the Defying Gravity sequence could have been tightened up just a tiny bit. That's really the only thing. But I did not feel impatient. I was not longing for the restroom. Nothing like that. I was riveted the whole time. And I'm really curious, like Aron, to see, is the part 2 also going to bring in more of the book? And I agree that the book and the musical in many ways are fundamentally incompatible, right? And I remember I met Gregory Maguire and chatted with him briefly at the Fresno Oz Gathering back in, I think it was 2012 or so. And I asked him about what he thought about the fact that the musical was so different, and he said he loved it because for him the core is the relationship between Glinda and Elphaba, and that they're kind of in tension with one another, and they kind of flip back and forth in terms of navigating morals and ethics, right? And it's really a love story about them, and I think that is very clear in this version. It is a love story between them. Like, the whole Fiyero thing kind of went into the background, kind of as it should, because it's about their love and their growth that they experience together. And I think the other thing that for me is really powerful, and this is something that Gregory Maguire has also talked about, that if you think about what is evil, and that's the main sort of theme of the book, and extent the musical and the movie, it begins with exclusion. It begins with ostracism. It's the othering of people. It's demonizing people who are different. And for anyone who's ever been ostracized, bullied, excluded, you can't help but feel that this helps to transcend and heal that a little bit. And again, we didn't talk about the Ozjust Ballroom, but in that moment where it's like a mob are ready to fall on Elphaba, and then she's just like, well, the heck with all of you, I'm going to do this weird dance, which Jeff Goldblum mirrors later on in the movie, which I thought was quite interesting. I need to go back and view that again. And they're all just ready to savage her. And then Glinda comes in, and then it becomes cool, and then everybody kind of falls into line. And that, for me, I mean, that alone was worth the price of admission. That you're just, even at the IMAX in London, because I think it gets at for me, the sort of what makes Oz special. And again, Gregory Maguire's Oz in the books is very, very dark. It's not Baum's Oz at all. But in that moment, I think there's a merger of what Baum's Oz meant. You know, it's about tolerance, it's about inclusion, it's about the celebration of difference, it's about love, it's about kindness. And that's the moment where you see those two Oz's coming together. And based on that alone, maybe I'll do 6 out of 5. The end.
I'm on board. I'll say 6 out of 5 too. It was really, it just surpassed every expectation that I had, which is, I think, why I was so emotional the first time I saw it. I'm really hopeful for what this means for not only movie musicals going forward, which I think we could use a little bit more of, but also what it means for Oz. I think, you know, it kind of is maybe not that we haven't had a plethora of Oz projects over the years, but I think that this is the first time that this amount of resource and money has been put behind it, and talent, and I mean, the merch is out of control. And yeah, it meant a lot to me to see it up there in that way. And I'm just excited to see where this goes. I will say I'm slightly apprehensive about whatever the third or fourth, you know, Oz project could be, because when I think about Wicked, I also think about what I was saying, where they had, you know, 20 plus years to workshop things and decide, okay, when we change mediums and make this a film, what things do we want to change? What do we want to expand upon? And I fear that whatever comes beyond the second movie, if they do that, will not have had the same treatment, you know, or we'll be waiting 25 years for that. So I'm excited for what it could open up, but I don't know. I'm here for it. Yeah, 6 out of 5 for me.
So for me, I'm going to go 5-star plus. You can have your 6s. And I say this as someone who's quite critical of stuff. So I don't remember, I love Oz, and you guys, you know, you've been on this channel, you've been to OzCon. We like to look at things from different angles and break things apart. So I can be very critical of some Oz stuff. And Oz the Great and Powerful, I'm a big Disney fan. So Oz the Great and Powerful should have been this great Disney Oz, and it's not. It's like 2 stars. It's barely watchable. Everyone's forgotten about it. It was a really cheap take on trying to take on from Wicked. So I loved everything about this movie. For me, it shows people that if you put enough respect and love into an Oz project, and to be respectful of the source material, not just Wicked, but MGM and the Oz books, that you can come up with greatness if you can be asked to do it, which has been part of the problem. People have just been, oh, nobody wants Oz. That's just, look at the reaction to this movie around the world. That is so not true. Just people want good Oz. that really gets to the heart of a story. And Oz is always at its absolute strongest when it's about powerful women, because that is at the heart of all the Bombs' work. It's at the heart of Maguire's work. And I will touch upon the Oz Ballroom sequence, which Judy touched upon very much so, which completely won me over on this movie more than anything else. That in that moment is someone being bullied on a horrendous level to the colour of their skin, their queerness, their oddness, everything that is different to everybody else in that room. And in that moment, Glinda steps in, not to make her popular in that moment. She steps in because she sees the horrendous thing that she's helped create, but also the way she's being treated. And two people come together off the back of that and see each other exactly as they are. That sold me on the entire movie. That's why I blot my eyes out every time I see that sequence, because me and Dwayne have chatted about this constantly. It's like someone sticks a knife in your chest and twists it, but then something amazing comes off the back of it. And I will leave it with that. Thank you, everybody. Chase, Aron, Dwayne, Judy. See you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
If you enjoyed our Wicked movie discussion, why not join our Wicked movie fans group on Facebook and join in the Wicked conversation? Oz Connection is the official YouTube channel of OzCon International. Join us June 20th to the 22nd, 2025 at Burbank, California. Each year we explore different Oz themes, and in celebration of the 40th anniversary of Return to Oz, this year's themes will be a deep dive into the Oz projects of the Walt Disney Company.